You found the most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. The nation and the league arrive in Las Vegas in 2020. Live from the CBS Sports Radio 1140 studios, it's Silver and Black Today. Join the conversation by calling 702-889-5978. And now, here's your host, Scott Gobranson.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today. It's always a good week for Raider Nation when the Raiders win. And not only win, but win in convincing fashion. That's right. Welcome back to Las Vegas's only all Raiders sports show. That's right. That is the Silver and Black Today, companion to silverandblacktoday.com. We appreciate you being with us as we do every week. And again, a reminder, today's show only an hour. Sorry for that, but we have Dodger baseball. The Dodgers are, of course, in the World Series. I'm going to say World Series hunt because, let's face it, no one else is going to touch them, at least in the Western Division, so they're going to lock up that division. But the Dodgers will come on the air at the top of the hour at 9 a.m., so only here for an hour. Our own Kelly Kreiner is on assignment, but we are going to do Kelly's Corner later, Chaz and I. My co-host Chaz Osborne is with us, and he is on the road in the Bay Area once again, but he is steady at my side. Chaz, how you doing this morning?
Hey, morning. Beautiful Sunday morning over here. How's it going over there?
It's great. Hot, of course, but we've had such a mild summer, man. I can't complain. I mean, hey, you give us a couple 110s, 111s, that's fine. Last year, I think we were over 100. Last year, we were like 105 over like 120 straight days or something like that. So it's fine.
Yeah.
And I can deal.
There's a few 115s in there, I remember.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, but doing okay, man. All right, so let's jump right in, Chaz. Oh, by the way, let me tell the listeners. Later in the show, after our break, we will be joined by Ted Wyman. Ted is the senior CFL columnist and the beat writer for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Of course, the Raiders are going up on Thursday, just a few days away, to play the Green Bay Packers in Winnipeg. And, of course, Raider Nation is international, so there's Raider fans up there. But we're going to talk to Ted because they've had trouble, Chaz, actually selling this game, selling the tickets. So we're going to talk to Ted about all of that and about the possibility of the NFL moving into the Canadian market as the NFL continues its international push. Chaz, you were just up in B.C. at a CFL game. How are football fans up there?
No, the football fans are great. It's fun because they have football on. They have a game Thursday night, a game Friday night, and a couple of games Saturday. So I don't think they have a problem with their hometown teams, but this one being so far away for the Raider fans, it feels like it's geographically closer for Green Bay. So if it was a Green Bay home game, I'm sure they'd be selling a lot more tickets.
Well, and it's interesting because as Ted, I've read Ted over the last couple of weeks, and one of the issues that we've come to find out, and we'll have him talk about it when we bring him on the air, is that it's actually Minnesota Viking country up there. So you have the arch rival of the Minnesota Vikings playing in kind of Viking territory, but it's Aaron Rodgers, it's big names. But apparently the issue up there is pricing. So Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun joins us after the break, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Okay, Chaz, let's jump in on this game from Thursday. Boy, did it start off fast. It was great to see. We wrote a piece up on the CBS Sports Radio 1140 website before the game saying, hey, here's three things to watch. One was Carr and his weapons. The second was the offensive line. And third was the improving defense. On those three areas, what was your impressions right from the get-go, Chaz?
Yeah, all three were great. Last week we saw the wide receivers on display, and again this week as well, but I think we were hoping to see a little bit more of the running back situation, and Josh Jacobs didn't disappoint us, did he? He was running right out of the gate. He had another level. You could just tell he's definitely the best running back, and he was worthy of that first round selection, I believe. As far as the Lions go, I felt like the Lions really won the game. It was interesting. Jordan Debbie started last week at center and played the whole first half with that first crew, and then he started again this week at right guard with the eventual, starters in the regular season. So watching that offensive line, and I thought they did a great job. I know there's been some talk about, trading for another offensive linemen, or maybe when the cuts come down, to pick somebody up off the wire. But it felt like he did a great job. We've got that next man up mentality. And all these guys, they're pretty versatile. Last week, Gruden mentioned Denver Kirkland as well as his post-game press conference. And, they really stepped it up. So I thought they did a great job. One of the things I saw when I was at training camp that I don't think any Raider fans I've never seen before was, Carr split out wide, and then Josh Jacobs was taking the direct snap, and they were doing a lot of the old Wildcat. They ran the Wildcat play a lot, and I know Greg Olson was asked about it, and after the practice press conference, and he said it was, they asked him if it was going to be maybe a new wrinkle in the offense. We're going to see this sort of thing. And he said it was more just for the defense to get accustomed to these running quarterbacks that we're going to be seeing during the season. And, you could tell it really worked because they kept Kyler Murray contained. So, and kudos to the offensive line, and the defensive line did a great job as well.
Yeah, and Chaz, Kyler Murray did not help himself. Neither did his coach with some of the play calling, and of course you had the whole hand clap thing. But I want to focus on you talking about the offensive line. Lester Cotton, I thought too. I commented on it during the game. The rookie out of Alabama, 6'4", 335. Number 67, I thought did a great job. So you're talking about that next man up, and that offensive line with what's going on with the injury to Gabe Jackson and, of course, the suspension to Richie Incognito in games 1 and 2. You're right that they seem to not. Of course, it's not the starters, right? It's not the frontline guys, but they are stepping in enough, and it is you're seeing still pretty much vanilla defenses. Also, although last night, as you went into week number 2, I should say on Thursday when you went into week number 2, you were seeing the fact that, hey, now we're going to show some more pressure. Even the Raiders on defense, of course, they did the old Paul Gunther A-gap, and they were rushing the passer, which is what caused so much of that disruption with Kyler Murray. Right. But yeah, and the other thing I wanted to comment before we move on to other parts of the game was you're right about Josh Jacobs, man. He had just 21 yards, but that 8-yard carry where he cut back just showed you the explosiveness and the athletic ability that this kid has. It's going to be very exciting as we see him. The only issue now, though, Chaz, is we go to Winnipeg, and I don't think you're going to see starters at all because of that turf, like you mentioned on last week's show.
Right, he kind of, I think I caught a little bit of the after the press conference on Thursday, or maybe it was before the game, and he was talking about maybe they might play limited, maybe one more series as well. So I was hoping to actually see the starters for 2 series on Thursday night's game, but
yeah,
one there, one there would be fun.
Well, and that's the thing. I was most interested in seeing Derek Carr out there. Of course, it was just the one series resulted in the 13-yard touchdown pass to Ryan Grant. But I wanted to see Derek Carr start to work with those weapons. And yes, one series you can't see overall how a thing's going to work. But, boy, it clicked really well. Having those extra tools, even without Antonio Brown last night, you could get a sense that not only was Carr more confident in the system, but he had more guys to throw to. And that wide receiver core, you mentioned it in the open, Chaz, they got a problem, and it's a great problem. You have 14 different receivers, 14 different receivers against the Cardinals caught a ball. And Keelan Doss, I think he continues to slide in and really start to solidify the fact that he's going to make this team.
Yeah, and Tyrell Williams, too. I guess he'd be the number 1 receiver right now. He made a beautiful catch on that opening drive. So everything was just clicking right now. But I can't say enough about Josh Jacobs. That was really nice to see that. Now, I guess we can talk a little bit about the backup quarterbacks.
Sure.
Glennon looked great, but, again, it really wasn't – all these guys – I know maybe Gruden's not opening up the offense very much because – Only 2 of Glennon's passes, traveled more than 5 yards. And same with Peterman. I don't think any of his passes went over 5 yards. But obviously the one big bomb, Glennon had the 50-yard touchdown pass. But that was already pre-planned. You could see that it was single man coverage. There was no safety help. He was going that route no matter what. And when the defender slipped, it gave Gathers a 5-yard cushion. That's all Glennon needed to complete that pass. He had the confidence. But, the other one, in the opening, he missed Darren Waller wide open in the back of the end zone on that first series. And then the second touchdown pass was a beautiful fade pass to the back of the end zone to Derek Carrier. But overall, Glennon, It's just these 5-yard passes, and the same thing with Peterman. So I'm really not sure. I know there's been a lot of talk about how great Glennon looked, but I still feel like the backup quarterback job is still 50-50. It could go either way.
Yeah, I thought Glennon did a good job on Thursday trying to solidify that second position behind Derek Carr. You talked about the 53-yard bomb to Rico Gafford, of course, and they jumped out to that 17-0 lead after that pass. And you look at Glennon, 11 of 14, 175 yards, 2 scores. Yes, I mean, Chaz, I know how you feel about Glennon. You talked about it after coming back from camp. And yes, they were the dink passes, but I will tell you that I think, yes, you need to pass downfield to win games, but if you're looking at a backup quarterback, I think they look more at can he protect the ball, and he certainly did. That was the encouraging thing, right? Neither of them had a turnover last night, which was good. On Thursday night. So that to me is one of those things where you look at him and say, okay, who's this? Now, Nathan Peterman, definitely even a smaller, different type of athlete. I think a better athlete. He showed his athleticism. Gruden switched up the play calling. You saw some RPOs. You saw some college-like option plays for him because he is a mobile quarterback. And he goes 8 for 8 for 41 yards to end the game. So to me, yeah, I think that's going to be a decision that you're gonna have to see in Game 4 of the preseason. Who plays better in that game might be the guy who locks up that second position, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. That's definitely going to come down to the wire, and it's just that argument. Do you go with more, seasoned veteran? I guess you could call Glennon. He's been in the league 6 years, where Peterman's only been in for 2 years. So do you go with a more stable veteran, or do you go with a guy that maybe has a little bit more upside because we haven't seen full arsenal yet? So it'll be interesting to see that one for sure.
It will. The one thing I will say too, the defense of the Raiders continued to look better. In fact, last week I talked about how everybody was freaking out a little too much about Arden Key and that they were getting a little too excited. Well, he proved me wrong last night. I thought in his second game really was consistent. I saw him play better over the entire time he played. And so I can admit when I'm wrong, Chaz, and I'm going to praise Key for a more complete game in week 2. He's not only making plays, but again, that consistency was big. Jonathan Abram, again, looked good, and Clellan Ferrell looked awesome. I thought he really is starting. You can see that comfort level, can't you, Chaz?
Yeah, that whole line, it looks like they're already starting to gel. And like you said, Arden Key's got energy. It might not be resulting in the sacks, but he's definitely disrupting the play, and he's just getting in there. It's nice to see. And then, of course, Clellan Ferrell is just, that's been fun to watch. I guess I wouldn't give a very high grade for the linebackers. They seemed a little out of sorts, but they were bringing a lot of different looks. And so it might take a little bit longer for everybody to get on the same page. But that was maybe the one position where I felt like the team was lacking.
Yeah, I'll put it more bluntly. I thought they stunk against Arizona on Thursday. Look, Chaz, they look slow. Yeah. They look unprepared. And when the Cardinals were able to succeed on offense, it happened a lot in the position where those linebackers are supposed to be or where they were. And to me, yes, Vontae's perfect. Brandon Marshall had a sack. Tahir Whitehead. Those guys didn't play as much. But if you look at Jason Kabinda, if you look at Markel Lee, those are guys that I've liked over time. But boy, did they just look out of shape. And I don't understand, the rest of the team does not look out of shape. Everybody looks pretty well conditioned. But that linebacking core, now it might just be because they were switching up the defenses, that they're just not up to game speed yet, and you have a couple more weeks to work that out. But that was disappointing because I really thought the upgrades there with Burfict and Marshall joining Whitehead and others you would see impact immediately, but I guess we're going to have to wait and see over the next couple of games.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of my feeling too. I feel like Paul Gunther's defense might be, it's pretty complicated, so it might be a little tougher for a few of those guys to grasp onto and everybody getting on the same page. But like you said, you have Kabinda and Markel Lee. Those guys, when I saw them up in camp, they were a couple of just high energy, maximum effort guys, and then last Thursday night's game just not so much.
Yeah. Well, Chaz, we're coming up on a break here, and I'll tell you what, the shout out I want to give to LaMarcus Joyner with that safety early in the game. Definitely, he is picking up that defensive backfield, and you can tell he's taken over that leadership role, and it's elevating everyone's play. So that's going to be fun to watch. Well, we're going to step aside, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Ted Wyman, and then Chaz, we're going to bring you back later in the show. Kelly, of course, isn't here, but we're going to do Kelly's Corner anyway. And we're going to do it on our man Antonio Brown, because I think Antonio Brown is getting a bum rap from the national media, Chaz. So we'll bring you back in. Chaz is, of course, joining us from the Bay Area. He's on assignment up there. When we come back later on in the show, Chaz, we'll do that. So we'll talk to you in a few minutes, and we're going to step aside and pay some bills. When we come back, Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun will join us to talk about the Raiders game up in Winnipeg against the Packers on Thursday. You're listening to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Hi, this is Steve Wisniewski, and you're listening to the Silver and Black Today.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio in Las Vegas. We go out on the attorney Michael Troiano newsmaker line and join up with Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun, sports columnist. Of course, he covers the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He's also the national CFL columnist up at the Winnipeg Sun, and he covers the Jets. So he's very, very familiar with Las Vegas thanks to the Golden Knights. Ted, thanks for joining us here on the Silver and Black Today.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, so let's talk about the football game that's going to be up there, of course, later in this week. That is the Packers and the Raiders. And just a few days ago, you wrote a story about the sales of the tickets slow. They've been surprisingly slow, although if you read on the history of the NFL over the last few years, ticket sales in Toronto previously and now Winnipeg, not as exactly as swift as they thought they would be. They've reduced the prices for about 6,000 seats down to about $75. Talk to me a little bit about how this promoter and the sales of these tickets haven't been what people expected it to be.
Well, first off, I'm not sure it's not what people haven't expected it to be, Scott. I think that it's certainly it's not what the promoter expected it to be. But the point is they put these ticket prices very, very high from the beginning, and it's tough. It's a tough sell. I mean, I think people in this town are very excited about the opportunity to get an NFL preseason game, but they know it's still the preseason. They recognize that you're not getting the same value as you get for a regular season game, and the price is really quite astronomical, to be honest. It started out at about $75, but they sold those all in the first couple of days to season ticket holders for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and then when it went unavailable, when the tickets went available to the full public, there was, a lot of tickets around $140 up to around $400.
Wow.
And the very best tickets obviously were $400. And it's just the people have reacted how I kind of thought they would, that they would not want to pay that amount. And therefore the ticket sales have been very sluggish. The best estimate right now is that they've sold half the tickets, but I'm not sure they're even at that.
And that's what's so strange about it. I mean, to me, it's not strange because of the pricing. You're right. I mean, even down here in the United States now with the preseason, the game against the Packers and the Raiders up there, you're going to see a lot more starters because it'll be the third week. At the same time, it's still preseason. Down here, people don't want to buy preseason games. In fact, the Raiders, who just finished playing in Arizona, you could buy tickets as cheap as $7 in the upper deck down in Arizona for the preseason because people know what's going on there. And the thing is, for those folks in the United States here, those folks that are Raiders fans, Winnipeg is a football hotbed. Yes, the Blue Bombers have not won the Grey Cup since 1990, but you have a very good team up there now, and people love their Blue Bombers there, don't they?
Well, I'm sure everyone in Winnipeg would thank you for reminding us about that streak without the Grey Cup. But yeah, of course, the team this year is averaging 25,000 fans a game. That's actually a little low. Yep. They were up around 27 last year, and it's a 33,000-seat stadium, so you'd like to see more people at the games. But the crowds do tend to pick up after Labor Day. In the summer, there's a lot of things that you're competing with in terms of warm weather and cottages and golf and all those kinds of things. So it's not the best time of season for attendance in the middle of summer. We do expect that to pick up a bit, but yeah, I mean, this is a hardcore football town, to be totally honest. It's been that way for years and years, and if you can imagine that Winnipeg's been in the top 2 or 3 in attendance in this league for the last 25 years, and they haven't won the championship once in those 25 years, you know that there's a pretty good and loyal fan base. So, but the tickets are priced for the CFL. They're priced appropriately, and people know exactly what they can get in that sense. And they have really good plans there where they have a ticket where young people can come, and it's just called a social ticket, and they can actually stand in the concourse and just drink with their friends and watch the game and not really even care that much about sitting in a seat or anything like that. So it goes really well in that sense. And another thing that needs to be brought up is we're not all that far from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and there are quite a few people from Winnipeg who are season ticket holders and go down there. And there's quite a few other people who just like to go once or twice a year. And as you pointed out about the cheapness of the preseason ticket, right now you can get one for $12 on StubHub to go to a Vikings game.
Yeah.
Or you can $400 to go to one here and watch the Packers and the Raiders. There's a pretty big difference there.
Well, and it's funny you brought that up because that's exactly what I was going to talk about next. Of course, this is the first game in Canada, NFL game in Canada since 2013. That's when Buffalo, of course, closer to Canada than even Green Bay. But Buffalo was up there. They played Atlanta at the Rogers Center in Toronto. Had some of the same issues with the ticket prices. In fact, there's been a spattering of other media folks who've written about this too, to saying, you're trying to get the NFL to be more popular, and perhaps the NFL, of course, thinking about international expansion, and perhaps Toronto or another market could be in line to eventually get an NFL team. Yes, that's been talked about for many, many years, but now you're starting to see a more concentrated effort. But you can't do that when you turn people off with ticket prices. And then, as you mentioned, you have to get teams that matter. And with all due respect to our Raider fans who listen to this show, and by the way, Ted, they haven't won since 1983, so they got that on you. But the Packers are actually the antithesis. I mean, the Vikings don't like the Packers don't like the Vikings. So you have a Vikings market, i.e. Winnipeg, and you bring their actually arch rival in against the Raiders, who have not been, let's face it, great for a long time. It's no wonder, too, that the promotion of this event hasn't hit on all cylinders. But overall, when you look at the NFL looking at Canada and maybe going there, does something like this really, really hurt it? Or is football big enough up there where if the NFL was going to come into Canada, people would welcome it with open arms?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's coming here anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Second of all, I think the Packers are a huge brand that are definitely a sell everywhere in Canada. In fact, my company, Post Media, which has a lot of papers across the country, actually did a fan poll about 5 or 6 years ago and polled the fans across the country of which team they liked the most. And the Packers actually were the number one team.
Wow,
so,
fascinating.
Interesting. And the Raiders, the Silver and Black has a pretty good brand that's been around for an awful long time. People love watching the NFL here. I mean, it's extremely popular on Sunday afternoons in the fall. There's just no question. And the CFL takes a back seat once the NFL season starts to a lot of people. There's still hardcore fans here. There's no question. But when it comes to TV watching, I think there's just as many people who plan their Sunday around watching football as there are in the U.S. And so, but that doesn't make it likely that they can have a team here, because as you found out in Toronto, when they had all those years of Buffalo coming there and playing games, regular season and preseason games, the fans did not really get behind it. It wasn't a big success. And, I think Toronto wants to be that kind of a market. I think they want to be a market that is an NFL, that would have an NFL team, because they've got the Raptors, who are obviously very successful. The Blue Jays have won some World Series. The Maple Leafs are a huge brand in the National Hockey League, and I think they feel like they should be part of another huge sport, which is the NFL. But that being said, I mean, it's not an easy sell. When you're talking about these kind of prices. I think if it was Toronto's own team, it would be different than when it's Buffalo.
Sure.
But again, I don't know how soon something like that would happen. I really don't.
Well, and that's the next question I was going to have for you was, as you mentioned, of course, when it's your own team, when it's someone who's going to set up shop there and be at home and be Toronto's team or whoever it may be, then suddenly you have an interest because that's your town, right? That's your hometown. That's what you get behind. When you look at the NFL and how this has gone back and forth with some success and then other times not, what is it going to? Is it going to be that? Is it going to take the fact that they commit to a team for folks, whether they be in Toronto or other parts of Canada, really get behind a team that was part of the NFL versus just another team coming to play a home game there or a preseason game?
Yeah, I think they would. It would make a big difference if there was a Canadian team, because as we saw with the Raptors this year, that really did resonate across the country because the one team from Canada won the NBA championship, first time ever a team outside of the United States winning it. And obviously that meant a lot to Canada, even though there were almost no Canadian connections to that team. In reality, they're still an incredibly popular team here. And I think that the same thing would happen with the NFL if it ever were to be able to get into that Toronto market. And truth be told, when it comes to the Canadian Football League, Toronto is the worst market. There's no question. The league is very popular in places like Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, Calgary and Edmonton and Ottawa, which are more the mid-sized cities. In the biggest cities, Toronto especially, it's not making a big impact right now, and not really that great in Vancouver or Montreal either. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen in the next 10, 15 years in terms of how those markets embrace even the CFL. And then obviously there are people with money and the will in Toronto to try to get an NFL team. I just don't know when or what the NFL is looking for in that area. Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard, Ted. Again, we're talking to Ted Wyman of the Winnipeg Sun, experienced sports columnist, and of course the beat writer of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And Ted, you look at the NFL, and it's interesting to get your perspective on this, being at least a little bit of a step away from it too, covering the CFL, and that is they have all these international plans. Of course, the Raiders are playing in London. The Raiders are traveling more on the road than all the other teams combined, basically. But they're going and they're playing there. Now we're hearing from sources in the league that they're going to start playing games in Asia, more games in Asia, because the Japanese now have professional football leagues where the American players can play, I think, one or two per team. So the NFL is looking at this international expansion, but here you have our neighbor to the north, Canada, who we have so much in common with, and it seems to have trouble up there. Is it the case of maybe that, well, geez, you don't have to be successful if you're the NFL and have a team there because you're able to market the other teams, like you said, the Packers, the most popular team in the country there, but giving opportunities to see the content, being able to see TV, maybe more TV up in Canada, is that maybe more of the answer until we can see if Canadians are willing to adopt the NFL and support a team up there?
Again, I think it goes back to if they had come into Winnipeg and with the promoter coming in here saying, we're going to put these tickets on at a reasonable price, with maybe the highest end ticket being $200 and the cheapest ticket being $75 or something along those lines, I think you'd have very close to a sellout here. So I just want to say that I think that's an important fact that needs to be said. I believe those ticket prices really are the reason that it's not selling out in Winnipeg. But that being said, when you talk about whether or not a team could ever be viable here from the NFL, I think it absolutely could and would. And a really interesting point that you brought up was about the leagues in Japan and places like that. The Canadian Football League, actually, you probably wouldn't be aware of this, is brought in a vision of the commissioners called CFL 2.0 this year. It just started, and they see this international market in places like Mexico, in Japan, in Europe, in places like Germany and Finland and in England, where there's people playing football. They're playing American rules football, and they're trying to tap into that. So they actually had a European draft this year. They had a Mexican draft, and they've got these players in the league. Only one player per team has a global player, but two players on each practice roster as well, just trying to develop some of that. And they really feel like the Canadian League feels like they could maybe be going overseas at some point to play some games, because they're seeing already an uptick in viewership in places like Mexico and Japan of their games on television. So I think that there is a huge global market. The CFL has made it very obvious that they want to be a part of that, and surely the NFL absolutely wants to be a part of that as well. And I think all professional leagues are starting to think that way. So it's going to be just an amazing time. I think one thing that comes into the conversation that we're having here is, would Canada possibly be passed over when these other places come available as markets for the NFL? And you got to think that is possible, because it's gone this long where it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it's always been surprising to me just because of yes, the football presence up in Canada. And even I worked in college athletics at one time, and I saw a slew of Canadian players come through, of course, American colleges. And so the sport overall, not only has it grown, is it popular in Canada, but as you mentioned, it's popular all over the world, into, of course, in the Western Hemisphere, but then into Europe and into Asia. So it'll be really interesting. But Ted, I appreciate you spending some time with us. Enjoy covering the game up there. And I'm sure we'll have you on again, and wish you the best of luck. Continue to the season. And, of course, the Blue Bombers. We will officially become Blue Bomber fans here for you, so that you can end that drought and raise the cup and feel good about it.
I'm sure everyone here will appreciate that. Thanks very much for having me.
All right, Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun. We're going to step aside. When we come back, the show rolls on. You're listening to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio, 1140.
CBS Sports Radio. This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Welcome back to Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio. Hope you're enjoying your Sunday. Just a reminder, we have Dodger baseball. Dodgers. Sorry, let me get my my broadcast voice out, right? The Dodgers are coming up at the top of the hour. So we were only on from 8 to 9 a.m. today. We apologize for the preempted show, but the Dodgers, of course, in the playoff run, and they are running away with it. But I know we have a lot of Dodger fans who are also in Raider Nation, but we are going to be on just for the hour today. And we want to, again, thank our guest, the last segment before the break. That was Ted Wyman of the Winnipeg Sun. And I just want to talk about that a little more. I mean, Raider fans know, look, we know in the United States with ticket prices, it is what it is. Prices are going up. A lot of fans in Raider Nation outside of Las Vegas very concerned with what ticket prices will do in the new stadium inside Allegiant Stadium, and that many people worried that they might not be able to afford tickets once the team gets here to Las Vegas. It's a real concern. I understand it. Tickets in Oakland, and this goes with having a dilapidated stadium, right? Tickets don't garner as much attention. Of course, the Raiders now leaving town. Some people have jumped off the bandwagon, understandable again. So you can get tickets pretty cheap at times. But when you look at what happened in Canada, and Ted talked about that last time, and it's something to explore because of the health of the NFL. But if you look at what happened there and the fact that going back to 2013 when they had a game in Toronto with Buffalo, now you would think Buffalo close enough to Toronto. Buffalo fans didn't go to Toronto to see the game. It's a preseason game, and even some of the regular season games, it just never clicked. Toronto, believe it or not a good football market at this point. It's big enough to support an NFL team, for example, but it's not going to move the needle when it comes to ticket sales. So they moved the game to Winnipeg. Totally makes sense, right? The Raiders agreed to do that and to play the Packers up there in a game where you'll see starters, at least maybe for 2 quarters, or at least the part of 2 quarters. And the Packers, like Ted said, they're popular in Canada, the most popular team overall in Canada. But in Winnipeg, particularly where the Raiders are going to play at IG Stadium on Thursday, they are mostly Vikings fans right in that regional area. They're very close enough to Minneapolis, just a drive away. And so why wouldn't you put the Vikings there? Now, I know the scheduling and all that was done in advance, so they do this. But then you have that. Okay, but the Raiders are a big brand, as Wyman said. So okay, the Packers popular, they'll bring people in. And so will the Raiders because of the mystique. Okay, the silver and black, the brand is very, very strong internationally, as well as nationally. So you bring those 2 teams there, 2 marquee teams, at least from a brand perspective. But then, when the tickets went on sale, your cheapest ticket was $164. $164 for a pregame in Canada with the Raiders and the Packers. Who's going to... I mean, look, I wouldn't pay that in the United States. I know what you're saying. I'm a Raider fan. I'll pay. But you know what? These are fans that don't have allegiances to either team. So from a marketing perspective, and I have professional experience doing this, from a marketing perspective, what you want to do is you want people to sample your product. Like, they know your product. Look, it's the NFL. Everybody knows the NFL. It's growing internationally, which is why they play these games. But why not get people in the door? Okay? Yeah, you might have to bring the prices down, but if you sell the place out, if you get 35,000 people there or 40,000 people there, I think it goes up to 40,000. If you get 40,000 people there, then suddenly you got something. You get people to sample the NFL football. It's a success. You make your money. But instead, this promoter, and I don't know how much the NFL had to do with it, maybe nothing, this promoter charges through the nose for tickets, and now you can't sell them. I mean, seriously, you want families to plop down $164 to go see reserves who probably will not be on the roster play? It's just dumb. And I think this is where I sometimes don't understand the NFL. Now, I get it. It's an outside promoter. It's a promoter up in Canada that is doing this, is running the game in essence up there. Look, the two teams are coming up there. The league's involved, of course. But I don't understand if the NFL believes that these international markets are key. I understand finding partners. I worked in the boxing game. I know how promoters work. I know how it happens. But to me, if I'm the NFL, I would run it because I want to make sure it's done right. And even if you've had experience with these people in the past, look, the NFL's history in Canada is not a great one. And it's crazy because they love football. Okay? Yes, the NFL doesn't have the Rouge and it doesn't have the 55-yard line. Okay? But it doesn't matter. They love football. And even as Ted said in our interview with him, they are even looking at expanding internationally. They have international players. They've had international drafts. So you have players from Mexico, from Europe on the Canadian Football League teams. So they're clearly looking at international markets too, which is totally fine. But I don't understand if you're the Raiders or if you're anybody like that, you want to grow your brand. I get it. Going into Canada is awesome. But the NFL certainly needs to pick their partners better so that you could do this, because there might be Raider fans. Hey, there might be Raider fans in the upper states, the Midwestern states of the United States who want to go see their Raiders play. Okay? So they got to get to Canada, whether it's flying or driving, whatever. But then you want to charge them $164 for an end zone seat at the end of the section and the nosebleeds if they have them, basically. No, I just think that this whole thing gets out of control because they don't think through from a fan perspective. We're going to step aside once again and pay some bills so we can stay on the air. You're listening to an abbreviated version of the Silver and Black today. We're heading out at the top of the hour for Dodger baseball. More Raiders football talk on the way. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
You found the most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. This is Silver and Black today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gobranson.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio, a shortened version. That's right, Dodger baseball's coming up here at the top of the hour, so don't miss that as they get started with their pregame show. We have this last little bit usually dedicated to our co-host, Kelly Kreiner, who is out today on assignment himself for the next couple weeks, actually, so he'll be back after that. But we forge on without him. We will try to channel all his snarkiness and, as he calls it, realism. And for that, I go back out on the attorney Michael Troiano newsmaker line, and I bring in my co-host, Chaz Osborne, who's with us from the Bay Area. All right, Chaz, let's jump in and let's do Kelly's Corner for him. And I really want to talk about this Antonio Brown, because as I was watching the game on Thursday night, first of all, Joe Tessitore and Booger McFarland don't like the broadcast. It hasn't gotten any better than last year. And first of all, no grown man, I don't care how long you've had the nickname, when you get into the broadcasting game, you should not be referred to as Booger. I'm sorry. It just shouldn't happen. But anyway, what I took issue with was the fact that Antonio Brown, let's look at what happened. Now, did he injure his feet? Was that an accident? Could it have been careless on his end? Maybe. We don't have the full story. So we'll hold judgment on that one. But he got injured. He came to camp. He talked to his team. He let them know. Then, secondarily, you have the helmet issue, right? He files the grievance with the NFL saying, listen, I want to use my old helmet even though you say it's not certified. He goes through the process, the rule of law, if you will, in the NFL. He follows it to the T. He's following the rules to the letter. And then he gets denied. So he says, okay, well, I'm trying to find a helmet that I can use that's closer to what I want to use. And so he does all this. So then last night, and in the national media, since all of this has happened, what we're hearing is last night, Joe Tessitore used over and over again the Antonio Brown antics. Now, arriving at training camp in a hot air balloon, okay, that's an antic, right? You're making an appearance. But I don't understand, and I think it's completely careless and completely biased by media and others to point or should say portray Antonio Brown as some big problem in the Raider locker room. You saw him on the sideline on Thursday night, Chaz. You saw him mixing it up with his teammates, laughing, enjoying. You could tell they were all excited. He changed the demeanor of the sideline by just being there. That's the one criticism that Booger McFarland made on the Monday Night Football team last Thursday, was that his only key criticism was that Brown didn't come to camp. Even though he wasn't playing, he should have been there. I would agree with that, but that's not antics. I think that for whatever reason, the way things ended in Pittsburgh, everybody wants to see this guy fail, and I think it's not right, and I think it's irresponsible of media to do that. What say you?
I don't want to bag on the media because I'm part of it now, but my being with the Lakers for those 14 years, I'd be sitting in the room with the owner and the general manager, and some breaking news or some stories would come on the TV that had nothing to do, nothing that we had ever discussed, or they were just totally outlandish. And we'd look at each other like, what are they talking about? Why are they doing this? And I understand that they're trying to get their clicks. They're trying to get their name out there, all these different media outlets. But you know what? I just want them to be concise. Give me the information and move on. I don't need to, make up all these crazy stories and start, I don't know, he said, she said kind of thing. And it bothers me a lot. I just want the information. I want to move on. Now, as far as Antonio Brown, I think like the hot air balloon, that was staged for Hard Knocks, right? They were trying to, make an entrance themselves. And so that kind of was blown out of proportion. And, I applaud him. He's channeling his inner Al Davis. He feels like he wants to do things his way. He's going to take it to court and push it all the way as far as he can. Why is he playing under their rules? If he doesn't believe that their rules are correct and he wants to do things his way, that's fine. And like you said, I don't think he's been any problem whatsoever. He came right back with the press conference, and he missed training camp because he was taking care of his feet. He did have to go to the court the one day, so that was one thing that kind of wasn't. Maybe it might have been a little out of bounds, but taking care of his feet was number one, and he was going to different specialists, and that's why he was gone for the better part of a week of training camp. So I'm definitely in Antonio Brown's corner. He's going to elevate the play. He's going to elevate everything on the team. And we talked about, earlier shows a month ago about the honeymoon period and how he's going to stay on track. So these kind of bumps here, these weren't really because he was trying to have a look at me moment. These are just things that just happened, and we're moving past it. And I don't think even he said the thing about him saying he was going to retire, that might have been a false tweet. And he came back and said, I'm not sure where they got that from. So, here's the media again blowing things out of proportion, and they're kind of making him look like a bad guy where, he hasn't really done anything wrong.
Well, and that's what I said before on this show, Chaz, and in writing, and again, Chaz Osborne, my co-host, joins us via the Michael Troiano Newsmaker line from the Bay Area. Chaz, is the fact that the media will, and this isn't meant to just be a bash on the media, not at all. I'm just saying in this particular situation, I don't think they are being fair. And as the media, right, they tend to want to punish people who aren't good to work with, right? And I've seen this before. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, there's times when we've had guests or people who were going to be guests and they canceled or they were difficult. And there is in your head, right, you sometimes think, well, geez, this guy's a jerk. And so I'll show them. Right. I'll show them. But most of us, I think, have a measure of restraint, and so we don't do that. Now, does our objectivity shift a little bit because even subconsciously now suddenly you have a little bit of a bias because this person isn't great to work with? Probably. I get that. But with Antonio Brown, you have openly members of the media from Pittsburgh, his premium market and previous market. And believe me, I get it. They probably weren't. He wasn't great to deal with there. So now they're coming out and actually rooting against failure and talking about how he's going to. So I get it. It's a little bit of fanboy-itis, I think. But at the same time, if you're a fair criticisms of Antonio Brown, I got no problem with that. How did you burn your feet? What happened? Was that responsible? Was that someone else's fault? Was that you just being careless? Okay, take that criticism, move on. The helmet thing, completely unfair. Yeah. Not being in camp with his team, I'm not sure what's going on there. Clearly, watching Hard Knocks, you could see John Gruden and the rest of the staff frustrated that he wasn't there. And again, I don't think that was a frustration over just him not being there, but him not being able to play. They want so badly him on the field, and just watching him in warm-ups over the course of the week, watching him in warm-ups on Thursday, you could see that he looks almost ready to go. So that's got to be very exciting for the team overall. But I just think, this is something we're going to have to hear. And I get Kyler Murray was the number one draft pick in the entire draft. So the broadcast on Thursday night, they had a lot of effort and time covering Kyler Murray, and it was all mostly, except for on the field where they were criticizing his play, it was all fluffy and rosy. And then meanwhile, you have all this stuff going on with the Raiders, and now I sound like an old Raider fan, don't I? That it was all negative and drama and all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, they're forgetting all the progress that they've made, and I just thought that was unfair to the Raiders and unfair to their fans watching the game.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's just like you said, whatever the last 9 years in Pittsburgh, where Antonio Brown's been a little standoffish with the media, and he has things a certain way. He'll only talk to them, one certain day of the week and all these other things. And so that's kind of festered and grown with the media, and now they're treating him like this. So it's a little unfair. I feel like maybe the helmet thing might have been a little bit more of a smokescreen on Antonio Brown's part, just to kind of deflect all the attention of the feet. And maybe, buy him a few more days of healing and so forth. But he did feel strongly about it, so it was something he went off to do. And at the same time, a few more days off of his feet was fine. So he's going to be back for opening game. We're going to see the offense on full display. It's going to be a beautiful thing. Hopefully everything clicks and we get the season off on the right foot. No pun intended.
Oh, nice one. Well, Chaz,
slip those dad jokes in there.
Well, man, thanks for joining us by phone. I was getting lonely here in the studio all by myself, so we appreciate you calling in. You'll be back. You'll be back live next week. Kelly is on vacation next week, so we'll miss him again. But we'll continue on with his Kelly's Corner. But we'll see what happens on Thursday against the Packers. How much will guys play? Clearly, a lot of the guys fighting that are maybe at the bottom rung that are on that cusp of either making the roster or not making the roster. We'll probably see a lot of those guys, and clearly you're going to see a lot of Mike Glennon and Nate Peterman, Chaz. And you still think Peterman's going to pull it out, or what's your sense going into this game?
Yeah, it's 50-50 for me now. Like I said, I think they're both pretty equal. So do you want to go with maybe a little more seasoned vet or maybe a younger guy that's got some upside? Either way, I think one of them probably just gets down on the practice squad. So they won't be too far away. But what's interesting, the cut downs this year, usually they do like a cut down to 75 until they get, and then the next week it's down. I feel like this year they're just doing 90 straight down to 53. So it's really going to be tough. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So they're just have to figure out everybody.
Yeah, and like I said, that we talked about it earlier in the show when you first came on, was the fact that wide receiver core, I mean, there's a lot of tough decisions. It's a great problem to have. But, man, there's some guys in that those wide receivers, a couple guys there you'd love to hold on to, but you're just not going to be able to. You're going to have to go, they'll probably go with 6 wide receivers maybe, and then you can stash one on the practice squad, but you have other needs. So I'm fascinated to see as we head after this game on Thursday against the Packers, then going into the final game the following Saturday against the Seahawks, how it all ends up. But, Chaz, one thing I do know, my friend, we will be here to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
All right, man.
Looking
Well,
forward to
listen.
it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us by phone. We'll see you in the studio next week. That's going to wrap it up. Again, we had only an hour today because Dodger baseball was up next here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. We appreciate you being with us. Make sure you can always download the archive of this show from your favorite place where you get podcasts, iTunes, Google Play. You can get it from SoundCloud, Spotify. Wherever you listen, you can find the show and there. It's also coming soon in archive version to radio.com. If you don't have the radio.com app, make sure you do that. You can stream us live anywhere. Take us all in your pocket with you, especially on Sundays, right? When we're on the air from 8 to 10, usually. For my co-host, Chaz Osborne, for Kelly Kreiner, who's on assignment and away, and for the entire staff here at CBS Sports Radio 1140 and Silver and Black Today, we thank you for joining us. We will talk to you next week. We'll be back at full strength and back to 2 hours next week. We appreciate it. And as always, may the autumn wind be at your back. You've been listening to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Take care, everybody.